Martin, and welcome to another great edition for Astronomy for Beginners. And welcome to part 3 in super tuning your NEQ-6 or EQ6 mounts. So in this video I'm going to take you through the moving parts. It's very crucial that these moving parts are replaced, renewed and reconditioned in order for your mount to move and track very smoothly. So in this video I'm going to go closer into detail on these moving parts of your mount and show you a few hints and tips along the way. So again, if you've not seen part 1 or part 2, I suggest you click on the top there, watch those videos first before you proceed to this part. So if you like my videos, please hit the like button. All that's doing is just pushing out these video contents more in the YouTube community. So again, please subscribe onto my channel. All that's doing is, if you subscribe onto my channel and you activate the notifications tab, which is the little bell in the corner of your screen, if you click on that, it's going to activate the notifications, so any future parts of this video will get published straight away and you will not miss out on those parts. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a closer look into part 3. So these are the tools and equipment you're going to need to recondition and clean up your gear rings and the bearings and all the moving parts on your EQ6 or NEQ6 mounts. As you can see there, you're going to need a heavy duty lump hammer, a small hammer, a used toothbrush, a small flat point screwdriver, a 2mm Allen key, ideally longer punches than these, because these are the long punches I've got. These are around about 6 inches long, but ideally you want something like 8-inch long punches. Again, the sizes, because they're flat tip drift punches, so the size you're going to need is between 3mm to 6mm maximum. Then you're going to need some clean rag, then a polishing duster. The sandpaper is very important, or emery cloth, depending which one you have. You want different grades of grit, okay, and ideally you want grit no more than 320, between 400, 800 or 1200 grit. More finer grit required is ideal as well. Okay, depends how bad or badly damaged your spindles on your mount can be, but you don't want to exceed the 320 because you don't want a too coarse grit, because if you have too much coarse grit you're gonna put some deep burrs onto your spindles. So you want really fine emery cloth, and 1200 or even more than that is ideal for this job. The next one is a good old metal polishing cloths or brasso like this, which is good stuff. Alright, ideally for cleaning up brass, copper, stainless steel, anything component wise you can use. Alright, use some kind of cleaning, polishing stuff like brasso. Now this really depends on how you want to clean your components, but this is just Loctite 7061 cleaner. You can use brake cleaner for cars. If you go buy from automotive shops, you can buy some brake disc cleaner, or you can use isopropyl alcohol 100% cleaning products. Now when you're using cleaning products like these, make sure you have adequate PPE. In other words, eye protection when you're cleaning your components. You don't want to get splash any of these into your eyes, alright? It could blind you. So again, using safety glasses or goggles, which is better. And when you're handling with cleaning products or agents, make sure you wear some protective gloves, right, to protect your hands. Also, you're going to need your Geoptik grease pack, okay, as well. That's also part of the tools and equipment. So again, this was mentioned in part 1, alright. If you've missed out part 1, please check out part 1 of this video. And last but not least, here's a vise with soft jaws to protect your work. Again, when you're working with moving parts, you don't want to damage your equipment, okay, because all these moving parts are very high precision made, and you don't want to be clamping down your work, and these soft jaws are going to protect. So again, a small vise like that is okay. Ideally you want a bigger one, alright, but this is just for demonstration purposes to show you. So as you can see, we have worm drive and gear wheel and our main gear ring. Again, remember, when you're refurbing any of these parts, do not mix and match between the RA axis and declination axis. All these parts here are mated together so it works precisely. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this gear wheel apart, because what we're going to do is we're going to clean these components. As you see, they are dirty, they're covered with grease and dirt, and we want to strip these parts out. So again, we grab ourselves a 2mm Allen key, alright, and as you see, we're going to crack these Allen grub screws here, as you can see there. So we're going to push the gear, so move that up to one side. We're going to crack these off. Again, and then there's 2 of these. Once you've cracked them off, what you're going to try and do is you're going to tap this gear out. Then we'll clamp mounting bracket onto a vise, get your 6mm punch and heavy duty hammer, and you're going to place the pin over, and as you're placing the pin over the middle spindle here, you're going to hammer down onto the work like so, and you're just going to gently tap it like so. It should all come apart like that. Again, when you're tapping that, I would recommend replacing these anyway, alright. These are not great bearings, alright, as you can see there's a lot of play in these, alright, so if you're going to do this job, replace these bearings. So there's the spindle for the worm drive, and then here's the gear. As you notice, I've cracked these off, I haven't taken off the grub screws. Then we're going to take bracket. As you can see, there is still another bearing there, so we're going to remove that bearing, and what we're going to do is we're going to flip it over like so. Clamp down the bracket, get a 6mm punch, line it up, and then gently tap squarely. That's it, there you go. That is now both bearings removed. So we're going to clean these parts using our degreaser or brake cleaner or isopropyl alcohol. Alright, we're going to clean all these components. Now the bearings I'm going to replace anyway, so I'm going to put them to one side and place them with new bearings. So we spray this up and we're just going to give this a good clean. Again, cleaning all these parts like so, getting rid of every bit of dirt and grime. Again, pay particular notice to these gears as well, as you can see there. Get rid of all the old grease, just cleaning them up like so. Also, as you can see there, getting the grime off the gear wheel. Get your toothbrush like so and just quickly just brush across like so. Get rid of all the grease and grime that way from the gears. Also same here on the worm drive. Just clean these parts up. Okay, it'll take a while, alright, but you want to get as much of that dirt and old grease as possible. So it'll take a few minutes cleaning these components up. Then clean your gearing. Okay. Again, cleaning the teeth on the gearing itself. Right, get rid of all that grease and grime. Now, as you can see there, we have a clean gearing. All the grease and dirt has been removed from the teeth. And as you can see now, what we're going to focus on is, as you can see, there's like loads of tiny indentations along this surface. So we're going to clean that up as best we can. We're not going to clean the inside here. This is an interference fit with the bearings, okay, that goes in there. So we're not going to do anything inside there, but what we're going to focus on is around here. We're going to take off a little tiny bit of material off and we're going to polish this very finely. Okay, and get rid of these horrible burrs and keep this nice and smooth. And that's what we're trying to do, is focus on that. So we're going to clamp it on the vise and we're going to sand down these parts. So we've got a gearing on the vise. As you can see here, I've used the soft jaws and I've clamped it on the edge. Okay, just like that. Again, what you're doing is you're clamping your work without damaging your component. So depending how badly worn your gearing is, alright, determines how much grade of grit of emery cloth you're going to use. Now, as mentioned before, do not use anything coarser than 320 grit if it's really badly worn. However, this is not too bad. This is actually in very good condition. I'm going to use very fine emery cloth, and this is 1200 grit, okay, very fine cloth. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap around like so around the gear, okay, like so around the gear. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to nice and slowly, evenly sand down all the way around the gearing. Okay, bit by bit. Okay, still a bit more sanding. Again, do the bottom one bit by bit. Work way for the top. Okay, as you can see, it's getting rid of all that rough edges, alright, and just keep doing it until you get a nice clean surface. So, as you can see there, after a lot of sanding down carefully, I've managed to clean up the gearing side. As you can see there, it's looking very nice and clean. All the slight imperfections, alright, they're still there, alright, but because of this quite deep, I don't want to remove too much. So all you're trying to do is just remove a small amount, okay, nice and even all the way around. At the moment it's a lot better than it was, so that's what we're trying to achieve, is making sure that this is nice and clean. I've gone through 320 to 800 to 1000 to 12,000, then I went down, then I went up to 2000 grit, okay, nice and even. It took about a good half an hour to get this to this stage, alright, and I'm really happy with it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to polish the ring using the good old, and you can use any other metal polish, okay, ideally suitable for brass, alright, and I'm just going to polish this nice and easy all the way around. So we put a metal polish, we're going to remove this off using a polishing cloth or duster, whatever you prefer. Alright, you're just going to buff it up to a deep shine, okay? That's what you're trying to do, get it nice and buffed up. So you might have to do quite a few attempts. Just keep applying the metal polish and just keep buffing it until you get the nice deep shine you want. So after a lot of sanding down, polishing all the parts, you should have parts that look like this. Again, I've got the actual housing nice and cleaned, all the threads are being cleaned up, it was alright. I've also sanded down a little bit on the face as well, just to clean up all the flaky paint. Okay, so it's nice and smooth. Alright, there's no grease in there. The worm drive is absolutely free from grease and it's all cleaned up. Even the spur gear is nicely cleaned, free from grease. All the teeth, it's even polished as well. Okay, and the more important, gearing. Look at that. That is absolutely gleaming. As you can see, I've just again sanded down the entire gearing. Okay, there is no imperfections inside the surface. It's highly polished, absolutely gleaming. As you can see there, I've done a little bit of polishing from the inside, only a little bit, because you've got to be careful not to remove too much material from the inside. Don't forget, the bearings go inside there. So as you see, what a massive difference. All this is going to do is not only put your parts in nice and easy, it's also going to run a lot smoother. Again, all the grease and all that is removed. Unfortunately, you can't polish the actual teeth, alright, so I'm afraid. But as long as they're grease free, okay, and clean, that's fine. So what we've got here is the three main bearings that hold each of the declination and RA axis. Now as you can see, these are the 6008 2RSH bearings. Now at the moment, normally these you don't have to replace. If you refer to Astro-Baby's blog site, on her webpage, normally these are pretty good quality. Now at the moment these are trashed, and as you can see, they're very rough Some don't even turn, like this one. I mean, look at that. This one doesn't turn very well. This one looks like there's loads of binding, and this one is okay. So normally, if you've got a lot of binding, or they're not very easy to rotate like that one, or there's binding here, as you can hear the roughness, then consider changing these for these bearings, which I have here. Now these are the SKF, and these are, like again, the two RS S1s. Now if you check the description below, these SKF bearings are slightly different to the recommendations from Astro-Baby's blog site. Also, I picked these is that this SKF, so in this SKF bearing it has a grease that can withstand minus 40 degrees. So there's no requirement for me to repack this, alright, which, believe it or not, in the UK is not going to get as cold as that. However, if you live in colder climates, then you will need to take off the seals and replace it and repack the grease, depending on your environment where you live. So maybe if you live in Canada, maybe this grease may be a bit too thick for colder climates, so you need a thinner grease. However, the other ones, the SKF that was recommended in Astro-Baby's blog page, they're an older bearing. Now I tried to find those bearings what she recommended, and I just can't find them anywhere. I believe that SKF don't actually sell those bearings at all anymore. So be careful not to order, because there's two different types of bearings. So these are the bearings I went for. The other ones I believe are 2RSC or 2RS1C. If there's a C at the end, okay, do not buy those ones, because those are designed, those wheel bearings are designed is when the bearing heats up at high temperatures. In other words, when the bearing heats up over time, the free play is taken up. However, these bearings are only suitable for like electric motors, wheel bearings and so forth. So hence the reason why there's free play on them. On these ones there's no free play, and because this bearing is only going to be operating at low temperature and at lower speeds, I got those because there's no free play. So avoid buying the ones we've got the C mark on there, because they're not the right ones. So make sure you order these types of bearings, right? Those ones there. The one in Astro-Baby's blog site, there's no such thing as that bearing anymore. So this is the only one I can find that's sort of the equivalent. If you're the lucky ones who have got the standard bearings and they're okay, and you've got no binding or free play, then you can actually refurb these. And to do this is you can, because they're a sealed unit, you can actually prise these seals off carefully. To do that is what you do is get yourself a flat point, very thin screwdriver, and you just basically prise off the seal from the outside edge, like that. So, right, it takes some doing. You just prise it off bit by bit, alright, and it will come off, like so. The seal pops off, right, there's your oil seal. You can see some of the grease there. It's in pretty good condition. So as you can see there, you can see the old grease here, and ideally I would clean this bearing by putting it into a degreasing bath. Again, you need to prise off the other seal as well in the process. So again, same principle, like so. As you can see there, prise it off. Some come off very easy. This seal is a bit damaged, so you want to remove both seals and then stick it in a degreased bath, or use the sprays or Loctite sprays and just clean up this bearing as much as you can. You want to remove all this grease completely. Or if you don't have a degreasing bath, alternatively you can do this. Again, I have the SKF bearings, right? I'm going to remove some of the old grease from them. Okay, I've just prized off the seals and I put them in this glass container. You can then just use WD-40, spray some WD-40, right? So you can get loads of oil in there, let it soak overnight, and then just clean them with a rag and all that, and brush them using your toothbrush to get all the grease out. Okay, that's another way you can do it. A word of warning: do not clean these in water. Okay, one, it's not going to remove the grease, and secondly, when the water does get through, it will start to rust all the steel balls and all that, and the race. So I do not recommend you try and clean this in water. It just doesn't work. So you got to use some kind of degreasing agent or liquid to try and eat up the old grease. Now, as you can see, between the difference between the SKF worm dry bearings and the standard ones. Now the standard ones are a metal, they've got like a metal seal all the way around. Unfortunately, these ones here that are pressed in on the standard Skywatcher, so you can't remove those, which I find it very annoying. See, with the SKF ones you can remove these oil seals quite easily, and it's quite simple. All you do is grab yourself a thin flat point screwdriver and then just prise off the seal. Right, these are a little bit smaller, so you might need a smaller, right, and they just pop off like that, as you see there. Right, that's removed. So when you repack them with grease, fresh grease, right, you can just pop the seals back in once they're packed. Alright, and that's the seal back in. Unfortunately, with the standard Skywatcher ones, you can't do that. Also, one thing I have noticed is that these have got loads of free play as well. Alright, and that's what the problem is. As suggested in Astro-Baby's blog page, there's tons of free play here. So that's why you should change these. Okay, they're not great, alright, but as time goes by, 4 years, and I've got loads of play. These here on the SKF seem to be a lot more robust, and there's hardly any free play on these. So I would seriously recommend replacing these for better ones like these. So as you can see, I've cleaned the bearing best I can. Okay, this is not actually clean enough for my liking. However, I'm just using this as a demonstration purpose. Now this is the old bearing. Alright, this again, it's free to rotate now. It's obviously cleaned up as best I can. Pay particular notice to cleaning up the oil seals. Okay, clean those up as well. Once they're cleaned and dry, you need to repack this with fresh grease and you need to use the Type 2 Geoptik grease. Right, this is for the bearing and shaft, right, and that's the grease to use. So for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to use car grease. Alright, this is not recommended to use bearing car grease, but this is just to show you, guys and girls, how to pack these bearings. Now, I've done these for over quite a few years now, being vehicle mechanic by trade. I've always done this, and to repack the grease into your bearing is get yourself a lump of grease, alright, and you're just going to squeeze the grease between the race like so, alright, packing the bearing. And what you're trying to do is, as you can see there, you can see the fresh grease coming out. Okay, the whole idea is to squeeze the old grease. Here's the new, alright, and you just keep packing it like so until the fresh grease forms a beading. Okay, like so, and you keep packing it up. I mean, that's not a lot of grease there, but you don't need to put too much grease. Right? Reasons for that is, as you're packing up the grease with fresh grease like that, alright, you don't want to put too much because the oil seals will probably pop out. So you just want enough for the fresh grease to come through, and then you just close that up like so, same as the back, clean that up, and then once you've packed the grease, you can then put the seals back in like so. Get the other seal, okay, and that is one bearing packed up. So we've got our new brass ring now reconditioned and cleaned up and highly polished. What we're going to do is place our new SKF bearings into both sides of this ring, and to do that you can do two ways. One, you place the new bearing inside here, then get a small hammer, use the old Skywatcher bearing, and what you're going to do is you're going to line it up and tap each side bit by bit until this bearing, as you see here, you see this race here and here, or until it's mated along at the end of this brass ring. Bear in mind, when you press, this is the reason why you use the old one, when you press these in, okay, tapping around against the old one, what that's trying to do is prevent you from hitting the brand new bearing. Remember, you do not want to be hitting anywhere around the seal or around the inner edge. You want to be hitting at least the outer race, okay, like so. If you hit the inner race or the actual seal, you're just going to damage your bearing. Hence the reason why you use the old ones, okay, to do that and tap it around there, so you prevent damage to the new bearing. So it's very crucial. Again, if you've got bearing press tools, I seriously recommend using those. They'll be much safer to use. So what you do is replace the bearing like so. Use the old Skywatcher bearing and you just tap like so. And as you can see there now, both sides are pressed in straight along the flange part, okay, where the ridge is, okay, they're nice and flush, okay, that's both bearings in there. However, there's one thing I need to highlight. There seems to be a bit of misconception here, I know I've seen a lot of videos and I've seen people assemble their NEQ-6 mounts. They seem to grease certain parts of this gearing. You apply the green grease along this slew ring, okay, the actual teeth. You only need to put light grease around where the shaft runs and around the seals, okay, at both ends. Alright, because you don't want two bearings rubbing off on each other's surface, so a bit of light film of light grease around there is more than adequate. However, I have seen a few people that have put grease along this surface. However, this surface here acts like a clutch, and the reasons for that is this surface here has to be dry. Okay, it has to be clean and it has to be polished. It doesn't have to be polished, but I had to polish mine because the actual surface there was actually binding against the mount casing. So that's the reason why I got rid of all the burrs and the wear, and I've just highly polished it. So as long as this is dry, there should be no grease at all. The main reasons for that is your clamping bolts go on this surface. So in other words, this part here acts like a clutch. So you want to release the clutch, the actual lock itself, so you can move the mount. But when you want to lock it in position, or particularly your declination or A axis, doesn't matter which one, you want the lock, the bolt, to act against there and lock in position. This is the main reason why you should never put grease on this surface here. Okay, particularly this part here. Alright, this is the part you do not want to be putting any grease. So this recess here, this 2mm recess, alright, between these points here, this recess, that's where that bolt locks in place. So as you can see, all the way around you see that recess. There should be no grease present at this point here. So if you put grease on there, what's it going to do? Well, the options is it will slip, and it's particularly if the mount is tracking, you're going to get some form of slippage, and all that's going to do is going to affect your images. So this has to be completely away from grease, and as long as it's clean, it's completely fine. So the only grease that should be there should be the actual green grease on the teeth, probably around the edges as well here, and just a film of grease at these bearing faces here. Okay, and that's it. So any grease here, should be no grease at all on this surface here. Alright, so it's something I just need to highlight there. The whole idea of this gearing is the bearings hold the shaft. So once you've clamped down your bearings into the mount, this gearing should be free from the casing. Okay, so there should be a gap, okay, between the ring. Okay, so this should not be touching the mount casing. So I thought I'd just address that slight concern there, but that's the reason why I polished it and cleaned it up as best I can, because this in a way is a clutch part of the system. So we're going to fit the worm drive back in. Again, there's a certain knack to it, so what you do is you feed the worm drive in like so, like that, slide it in, you then place your gear wheel like so, and you align it up to the flat flange. Okay, you don't tighten up anything just yet. What you do is you fit it flush like so, then get your 2mm Allen key and just nip up one of them like so, just nip it up. Then you get your new SKF bearings and you slide these in like so. Line up the shaft. Okay, it takes some doing, but you will be able to get them through. Just line them up like so along the shaft, and they just push straight in. Okay, and that is your worm drive connected up. So once you've got that lined up, there's a special technique to adjust the worm drive, and what you do is you screw on the end cap on the gear side first. So you screw on the end cap first, okay, till you can't tighten it anymore. Then you can just tweak it up using a tool. Okay, happy days. That's the end cap tightened up. You may see the actual bearings push out a little bit, but do not worry about that. Then what you do is get your retaining ring. Ideally, with the threads already cleaned up, is to use some thread lock on this ring. Reasons for using thread lock, so that it doesn't work itself loose. You then line it up to the threads like so. This is very crucial that you line it up by the threads first. Once they're lined up, take the pins off the tool using the spline and wind it in all the way down Now this is where it gets tight. Okay, tighten it up, check the worm drive. What you're trying to do is making sure that this worm drive does not slide back and forth. Once tight and it doesn't slide back and forth, alright, and you've got no free play, you can then place the cap. What I will do first is line up the tool, okay, and just a quick nip, that's it. Not too tight because you don't want too much friction, so tighten it up, back it off slightly. It should be free to rotate. If not, just go back again, tighten up, back it off. It should be able to free to rotate, and there should be no backlash, right? No free play between the drive. Once that's done, replace one of the caps, tighten off by hand, line up the pins, tighten it up, there you go. That is now the worm drive tightened up and adjusted properly. A good indication is you can see that the threads are parallel here as well in the middle. As you can see here, there should be a natural gap in the middle. There should be no bearing sliding up and down. That is for people who want to refurb their normal gear drive system. Now if you're doing the belt modification, please refer to part 4, as this is a different approach. So what you should have now is your declination and your R8 axis worm and gear ring drives fully refurbed and fully adjusted. And for the guys that are just doing the recon, so using the type 1 grease, which is the Equatorial grease. You just cover the grease around the spur gear, on the worm drive teeth, and all the way around the gear rings teeth, okay, with this green grease. Now if you want to replace the taper roller bearings, we're back on the mount head, and as you can see, you see like a bearing race here. Now if you're replacing the original Skywatcher taper roller bearings, you need to remove this race in order to refit the new SKF bearing, or whatever bearing brands you want to choose. It is important to replace that shell. If you use the existing Skywatcher shell and use it on a different bearing, then I'm afraid that your bearing will not adjust properly, plus you're always going to get some kind of free play. So you must remove this shell in order to replace it with a newer shell, so that your bearings will run smoothly. Again, if you're on a limited budget, then and the Skywatcher shells are in pretty good condition, so if there's no bluing or any wear along this race, then you should be good to go. Now you can see here, you can just see at the bottom is where the race begins. Right, you can just see the edge of this race. What you've got to do is you've got to use a lump hammer and a 6mm punch to just carefully tap evenly to extract that shell. So tapping it along the edge like so. Careful taps, that's all you need to do. Again, each bit along the side, from the left to the right, and it will come out, because you can just see it's starting to come out from the ridge here. And there you go, that's the race out. Now as you can see, I've tapped the old race out. Now it only goes one way. This is the side that we hit, so it needs to go in that way. The race is tapered, alright, to compensate with the taper roller bearing. So remember the flat base here must go in first, so it's all tapered. We've got our new bearing, so use the new race. You're going to line the new race into here. I would use a mallet, a plastic mallet for this, and just tap it in. Or if you don't have one, what you could do, use the old race to fit over there, and then you're going to carefully, so you're going to line up the old race and just carefully, using a light hammer, tap in the race. Alright, just gentle taps. So we got to the end and it's almost going flush, but we need to get it so it's seated into, we'll take a close look, you'll see a gap there. So we need to seat this race further in more, so this gap here is closed. So as we can see, we've still got a bit of a gap here, and I can't tap any more. So we got to try and we got to get this race nice and square, so there's no gaps here. So alternatively, what you could do is use the old race, flip it round to that side, line it up, and just quickly just tap in. Unfortunately, you've got to be careful not to tap fully in, or you can get this race trapped. Okay? So you've got to be careful with this method. If it's stuck, get yourself a drift, okay, and just tap with a 6mm drift, right, and just tap it in. Now, as you can see now, we are flush all the way in. So that is now the bearing race fully installed. We're now at this part now, the RA axis. As you can see, there is another bearing shell you've got to remove. This bearing shell is a little bit more difficult to get out. Now, as you can see, there's not much room to play about with, and there's a tiny little lip along the side here. So you're going to have to use a 3mm punch to punch out and extract this shell out. That's why you need a longer punch to extract it. You can't put any extractors to pull them out, so using the drift punch method is the only way to get this out. So again, this is not pressed in, it's not heat treated. You've got to clamp this head safely. Ideally, do not clamp anything along this shaft. Okay, this shaft, if you start clamping it onto the shaft here, you're going to damage this shaft, and you don't want to damage this shaft because it's all mated together. Hence the reason why I put a protection cling film, so I don't damage this shaft. So what we'll do is we need to extract this shell from this side carefully using a 3mm punch. As you can see, the 3mm punch, it's going to be a bit difficult. As you can see, I need a longer punch. But what the whole idea is, just that another 2 inches and all that will be okay. And all I do is hammer this out like I did before with the other race, tap it out each side bit by bit, and it will come out eventually. One way to tap it out is I feed my punch through the inside, okay, of the race. Alright, and what I do is I carefully, once I got it lined up, I just comes out like that. Alright, just gentle taps. We're going to replace this with a new bearing race, okay, and again flat end first, and then you're just going to gently tap this in, nice and easy. Use the old race as a guide, okay, and just tap it nice and square, okay. Keep going that until it's nice and flush. So we now got it fully in, just about. We just need to fill in this gap here. There's still a gap there, so it needs to fit flush all the way to the gap. So using the 3mm punch, just gently tap it in. Like so. We're now flush. That is now the new bearing race fully installed. After the new race has been installed, we're going to install the new SKF bearing on top of here. Usually it can just push fit. If not, you have to use the old Skywatcher bearing, and we're just going to tap. So we're nearly home. We just got to tap it a bit more till it's flush. And now we're fully home onto the top of the RA axis, and we're nice and flush at the bottom as well. So that's both the race and the top bearing in place. And the final part is to put on the mount, is to put the last SKF bearing inside needs to go inside there. It just slots right in. Okay, so again, just carefully so we're just going to line it up. Okay, now if it doesn't go all the way in, don't worry about it. What you can do is when you put the shaft in, it can push it all the way in nice and square. But if you don't like to do that, then the old bearing, and tap that in with the small hammer. Okay, and just tap that in. Like so. So once it's home, that is it. So even though it looks as if it's sticking out a bit there, it doesn't look like seated, but believe me, that's all the way in. So don't try to keep hammering it all the way down, because it's not going to go anywhere. And if you try and hammer it all the way down, you're going to damage the casting, or you're going to damage the bearing that way. So it only goes so far in, and that is it. So we're on our R8 axis shaft. As you can see here, I've just quickly sand down with very, very fine emery cloth, as you can see there, just to sand off these mated surfaces there and here. Now if you've got damaged spindles with burrs or any indentations, then you need to sand these down. Otherwise what will happen is when you put your bearings and everything else together, this is not going to fit very well. So it's a good idea to clean up these surfaces with a bit of fine, very fine emery cloth of 1200 grit or more, just to smooth this off a bit. It's nice and clean, no rust, no damage on these surfaces. So be aware not to take off too much material. Okay, these are very accurate surfaces and they need to be spot on. So just a mild sand down, that is all it takes. Just enough for all the bearings and all the components to slide through very smoothly. If you get play in there because you remove too much, it will affect your tracking and everything else. So you only do this as a need basis. In other words, inspect the spindle, check for any wear or tear or damage or any mild rusting, and just sand it down nice and easy. This is the same for the declination axis as well. Alright, this is just wrapped up at the moment. But on the declination axis, that too has some mated surfaces. So again, you've got to be careful, okay? So just sand down the top bits of this declination axis and take your time. If there's no damage or no signs of any burring, okay, then leave it alone. So we've got now our R8 axis and declination axis taper roller bearings. So now what we're going to do is going to repack these with the type 2 bearing and shaft grease from Geoptik, and we're going to pack these using that method I showed you. You get a bit of grease and you just pack it like so until the grease comes out through the rollers, and you just keep packing it nice and easy, forcing that grease through. Apply some more grease. As you can just see now, the grease is coming through, and as you can see there now, I've fully packed my bearings. You can just see the grease coming through, the beading all the way around. You don't need to overpack it, just enough so it gets between the rollers, alright, as you can see there, and those bearings are now greased up. So we're going to safely store them in a nice container, because I can't install them just yet, but I've got everything ready to install all the parts onto the mount. Then you want to clean up your motor drives, so you need to remove these gears. Again, this is the declination axis motor, so I use a 2mm Allen key and I crack off these bolts here. I crack off the bottom one here. Once that's cracked, once they're all cracked off, you can then begin to disconnect the drive. Then get your 2.5 Allen key and remove the 3 screws supporting the plates. Okay, lift off, and there you go. That is the motor drive gears disconnected. Now, as you can see there, I've just cleaned up the components of the motor, of the gear and motor drive. As you can see, please note you've got 3 spacer washers. So when you disconnect this part here with the spur gear and the pin, just make sure which washers before you've taken it off where they were positioned. So once you've cleaned them up, assemble all that back together. Now, I'm not going to put this together because I'm doing a belt modification, and there is a special technique to remove this pinion gear from the motor. So even though when you're slacking off the 2 grub screws, it doesn't come off very easily. Please wait till part 4 for the belt modification, as I'll go more in depth onto removing this gear drive. But apart from that, if you're not doing the belt modification, you can assemble all this back together and then re-grease it. So it's quite easy to do. Alright, you just assemble it in reverse, back together, and then that's it. So as you can see, a lot of work involved. Now I hope this video of part 3 has given you some valuable information on the moving parts of your mount. Again, these are my experiences. I'm just giving a few hints and tips along the way to help you guys and girls out if you want to undertake this super tune project for your mounts. So again, if you like my video, please hit the like button, and also please subscribe onto my channel, activate the notifications, and so you won't miss out any of the parts coming soon. Again, we're also available for Facebook group, Astronomy for Beginners. Again, please join that group. We've got a lot of experienced astronomers and astrophotographers on that group. Share your experiences, or with any advice you need to start off with astronomy, I suggest you join that group. So that includes part 3. Please look forward to part 4, where I'm going to go more in depth on the Rowan engineering belt modification. Again, I had a few people advise me to undertake this modification. So I dig deep into it, and I'm going to take you through the belt modification on part 4. So please look forward to part 4. Thanks again, thanks for watching, and clear skies to you all.